I'm very blessed to be here this morning. Thank you so much for the invitation. Yes, my home church is Cooleycup. So Cooleycup is almost 2 hours, well, it's east. I don't know if that way's east. I feel a bit spun around sometimes. And anyway, east, whatever direction that might be, that's where Cooleycup is. And I grew up as a farmer's daughter. And I am now a farmer's wife. I'm still a farmer's wife. And we are the parents of farmers. So the country is in my veins. And the older I get, the less I can deny it, and probably the less I want to. This morning, I want to talk to you about sheep. And I want to talk to you about sheep, and I want to talk to you about shepherds. I feel so lucky to have been surrounded by this picture. By some fabulous shepherds. These shepherds are very passionate about their flocks. Well, actually, we call them mobs. We call them mobs of sheep. And all these mobs look different. But these shepherds love their sheep. Their sheep matter to them. It matters to them that their needs are met. Their days are structured around the needs of their sheep. I know that left on their own, these sheep are not going to do well. These shepherds know that these sheep need constant care. Sometimes sheep have the ability to drive these sweet shepherds almost out of their living mind with frustration. If any of you have had the pleasure, we'll call it a pleasure for today, of doing sheep work in sheep yards, you will understand how challenging it can be. You see, either sheep are somewhat dense, or they're just so clever they know how to manipulate you into a wild rage. There's a story, it's actually a true story, about a shepherd's wife who was working in her house. Her children, 2 boys and a girl, were outside playing. She needed to get the washing on the line and she headed out to the clothesline. And while she was out at the clothesline, she heard some fairly colourful language coming from behind the shearing shed in the direction of the sheep yards. So as you can imagine, she was fairly keen to go and see what was happening. And on inspection, she found 3 children in the sheep yards, yelling their entire vocabulary of curse words. She was absolutely shocked and bewildered and said to them, "What on earth are you doing?" They answered her, "Don't worry, Mum, we are just practicing." Working with sheep can be very hard, exhausting, and frustrating. You see, being a shepherd is the work of a lifetime. And often it is handed down from one generation to the next. Because somebody has got to care for the sheep. Sheep never thrive on their own. They need a shepherd. I'm going to show you this video of a shepherd. Oh. You don't want to play. As we get that sorted out, this shepherd is on a mission. He's got to get these sheep from one place to the next. But he's very lucky. He has got the help of some really good sheepdogs. We'll call them disciples. Now, these disciples, they're going about their job. They haven't said to the shepherd, now, we're not going to go out there if you haven't got those gates organised. They don't say to the shepherd, if the price of wool isn't good enough, we're not going to be bothered. They don't say to the shepherd, unless you sort out what's going on with live export, this is going to be a big fat waste of time. All they do is listen. They have their eyes on the shepherd, and their mission is the sheep. But you know, these disciples, these dogs, they are not born that good. These dogs are trained from when they are very little. They had to learn how to listen. They had to learn the sound of the shepherd's voice. They had to know how to recognise the guidance from the shepherd, and they had to learn to love him. Now, this fella, he's mine. I'm not a shepherd, and he's not a sheepdog. But for today, we'll still call him a disciple. Now, unlike the other disciples that I was talking about, this one doesn't have any training. There are still times when he thinks he knows what is best for the sheep. Yeah, this is what he thought was going to be best for the lamb. The other morning, I'm on the veranda. He has gone to the paddock. He has plucked out the lamb and he has brought it to me. And he is trying to make it stay with me. Fortunately, I know a shepherd who could take this lamb and give it back to its mother. Another time, we went for a walk. He saw a mob of sheep and he was convinced he knew what to do. He took off and within seconds there were sheep scattered everywhere. He was convinced he knew what he was doing. It was going to be great fun. And even when he came back, you've never seen such a pleased look on his face. He thought he had done a fabulous job, completely oblivious to the problems he had caused. You see, the life of a shepherd can be very frustrating. Jesus often used the metaphor of sheep and shepherd to help us understand our relationship with him. How fitting is it that God and his Messiah are the role of the Good Shepherd? His own people and not in a very complimentary way, and with respect to all things that God made, for the most part, we are like sheep. At times, somewhat dense. I have shared this story with you, or these stories with you, to build the background for the story in John 21. The story of Peter's final encounter with Jesus. Are we able to get this video? John 21 tells us the story of when Jesus comes back. Oh, we've got it. We've got it.
I go fishing.
We will also go with thee.
Children! Have you any meat? Cast the net on the right side of the ship, and you shall find. It is the Lord. Bring up the fish which you have now caught. Come and dine.
Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these?
Yea, Lord. Thou knowest that I love thee.
Feed my lambs. Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me?
Yea, Lord. Thou knowest that I love thee.
Feed my sheep. Simon, son of Jonas. Lovest thou me?
Lord, thou knowest all things. Thou knowest that I love thee.
Feed my sheep.
All things.
Of Jonas.
Thank you. What an amazing encounter. First, Jesus greets them like a friend. He asks them how they're going. He cares what's happening in their day. Then he blesses them with guidance. They listen and obey and are rewarded with an awesome catch. Then, as they share breakfast, Jesus has his final discussion with Simon Peter. He uses Peter's name from before he was a disciple because there had just been some issues. And Peter was feeling a bit on the outer because Jesus, the one who he had worked with for over 3 years, he had loved him, believed him, served alongside him, and in a moment of weakness, when Jesus needed him, he denied him. 3 times he made a mistake. Can you imagine how Peter must have been feeling the first time he made eye contact with Jesus after the rooster crowed? That shame, guilt, and disappointment in himself for having made the mistake, running over and over in his head. Yet Jesus came and reinstated him in front of the other disciples. 3 times he looked into his eyes and asked him, "But do you love me?" 3 times Peter got to look in Jesus' eyes and say, "Lord, you know I love you." Peter, the imperfect. How would we respond if Jesus stood in front of us and said, "Tiani, do you love me?" Bunbury Church, do you love me? Do you love me more than all of these? Am I the one you love the most? In Psalms 139, we read that God has a plan for us. And he made us. He stitched us together in the womb. He knows us. And he loves us anyway. And God never makes mistakes. And he made us. As humans, we do make mistakes. And sometimes that self-doubt sits real heavy on us. I'm hoping to get through this bit. A wonderful shepherd said to me said to me one time, because I had made a mistake. And he said to me, Tian, don't worry. Don't worry about the mistake. Because getting it wrong is just what happens on the way to getting it right. We are not our mistakes. Jesus didn't hang on the cross for no reason. He didn't go through that for nothing. He went through that so that we get to live forever. He did that so that he could forgive us for the things that we got wrong. Sometimes I can be a lot less like a well-trained Kelpie and a lot more like an untrained Labrador. I can lean on my own understanding and I can get it wrong. There are times I have got to seek forgiveness. The Bible is full of highly effective servants of God who often struggled. They got it wrong. They made mistakes. Jesus didn't see the mistakes. He looked past them and saw them the very best version they could be. I feel like Peter may have been feeling the weight of self-doubt. I feel like he may have been feeling a bit unworthy. But that wasn't what Jesus saw. What Jesus saw was a man with a broken but willing heart. And all he asked was, "Do you love me?" There wasn't a long checklist of theological questions Peter had to answer. He only had to answer one question. Do you love me? He didn't even have to ask, do you believe in me? Believing is important. But when it comes to feeding God's sheep, nurturing his flock, first he wants to know, do you love me? When it comes to keeping the 10 Commandments, John 14:15 says, if you love me, keep my commandments. Because the rules don't work if there is no love. Ellen White says, don't even criticise somebody unless you're willing to die for them. That is big. Peter, what an incredible example. He was a chosen disciple. He was a flawed man who Jesus loved. And he loved him so much. He had a job for him to do. But for him to do this job, Jesus knew Peter had to get rid of the self-doubt. He knew Peter needed to tell him 3 times, yes, Lord, I love thee, before he said, feed my sheep. Jesus calls us all to be disciples. You and me, flaws and all. But we must listen. We must recognise his voice, grow to love him, and then feed his sheep. Because, as I explained earlier, every sheep needs a shepherd.